The champagne flute shattered against the marble floor, golden liquid spreading like a promise of things to come. My sister Victoria stood there, her designer heels carefully positioned away from the mess she'd just created, that familiar sneer twisting her perfectly glossed lips. "Enjoy your sad little life," she said, each word dripping with the kind of venom only family can truly perfect. The other guests at my parents' anniversary party pretended not to notice, but I saw the sideways glances, heard the whispered comments behind manicured hands. This was supposed to be my moment of humiliation, the final proof that I, Emma Winters, was nothing more than the family disappointment, the struggling artist living in a studio apartment while my siblings conquered corporate boardrooms. What Victoria didn't know, what none of them knew, was that 3 hours earlier, I'd received a call that would change everything. But I'm getting ahead of myself. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, if you've ever been told you're not good enough, not successful enough, not anything enough, then stay with me. Because what happened next proved that sometimes the universe has a sense of humor darker than my sister's soul. My name isn't actually important to this story, but my label in the Winters family certainly is: the failure. While Victoria became a high-powered attorney at 32, and my brother James built a tech startup that sold for millions before he turned 28, I was the one who dropped out of business school to pursue photography. I was the one who served coffee to pay rent while they signed six-figure deals. I was the one who showed up to family gatherings and thrift store finds while they wore clothes that cost more than my monthly income. The anniversary party was being held at my parents' estate in Connecticut, a sprawling mansion that looked like it had been plucked from the pages of Architectural Digest, which, ironically, it had been featured in twice. The guest list read like a who's who of East Coast society, and I'd only been invited because, as my mother had so delicately put it, "It would look odd if you weren't there, Emma. Just try to blend in." Blending in meant standing near the kitchen entrance, nursing the same glass of water I'd been holding for an hour, watching my siblings hold court with their success stories. Victoria was regaling a group with tales of her latest courtroom victory, a multi-million-dollar settlement that had made headlines. James was discussing his new venture capital fund with several interested investors, and there I was, the 26-year-old disappointment, wearing a black dress I'd bought 4 years ago for my college graduation, trying to make myself invisible. That's when Marcus Rothwell approached me. Marcus had been James's roommate at Yale, and he'd always been kind to me in that pitying way people are kind to wounded animals. "Emma," he said, his voice gentle, "how's the photography going?" Before I could answer, Victoria materialized beside us, her presence commanding attention like it always did. She was wearing a crimson dress that probably cost more than I made in 3 months, her dark hair styled in waves that looked effortless, but I knew had taken her stylist 2 hours to perfect. "Oh, Marcus," she laughed, that tinkling sound that had charmed judges and juries alike. "Emma doesn't really do photography anymore. She takes pictures of people's food for their Instagram accounts. Isn't that right, Em?" The truth was more complicated than that. Yes, I did take photos for social media influencers sometimes. It paid the bills. But I also had a growing portfolio of street photography that had caught the attention of several galleries. Not that my family knew or cared about that distinction. "It's honest work," I said quietly, a phrase I'd repeated so many times it had lost all meaning. "Honest work," Victoria repeated, her tone making it sound like I'd said something quaint and amusing. "That's one way to put it. Remember when we were kids, Em? You used to say you'd be famous one day. You'd travel the world taking pictures for National Geographic." She turned to Marcus, her smile sharp as broken glass. "Now she takes pictures of avocado toast. Life has a way of humbling us all, doesn't it?" That's when she did it. In a gesture that looked accidental to anyone watching, she knocked her champagne glass off the cocktail table beside us. It shattered spectacularly, drawing everyone's attention. As I knelt to help clean it up, because of course I did, she leaned down and whispered those words that would echo in my mind for years to come. Enjoy your sad little life." She straightened up, apologizing loudly to the room for her clumsiness, playing the part of the slightly tipsy but charming daughter perfectly. I stayed on my knees, picking up glass shards, feeling the weight of every eye in the room on me. The help. That's what I looked like. The help. My mother appeared, her face a mask of polite concern that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Emma, dear, leave that for the staff. You're getting your dress dirty." But there was no staff nearby, and we both knew it. This was just another moment in the long performance of my family, pretending I was something more than an embarrassment, while simultaneously ensuring everyone knew exactly what I was. I stood up, my hands bleeding slightly from a small cut, my dignity in pieces smaller than the glass on the floor. "I need some air," I said to no one in particular. Outside on the terrace, I stood in the cool October night, looking out at the perfectly manicured gardens that stretched toward the horizon. The sound of laughter and conversation drifted from inside, a world I was technically part of, but had never truly belonged to. My phone buzzed in my clutch. I almost didn't check it. What would be the point? Another rejection from a gallery? Another client canceling a shoot? But habit made me look. The email was from an address I didn't recognize. ProductionsEliteStyleMagazine.com. My heart stopped. Elite Style was one of the biggest lifestyle magazines in the country, the kind of publication that could make or break careers. The kind of magazine my sister had been desperately trying to get featured in for years. "Dear Ms. Winters," the email began, "we hope this finds you well. We are reaching out regarding an urgent matter concerning a feature story we are producing for our December issue, Hidden Treasures, The Secret Success Stories of America." I had to read the next paragraph 3 times before it sank in. "We have been following your work under your professional pseudonym, E.W. Frost, for the past 18 months. Your recent exhibition at the Gorilla Gallery in Brooklyn, your upcoming book with Threshold Press, and your selection as one of the International Photography Awards' Emerging Talents have caught our attention. We would like to feature you as our cover story." E.W. Frost. The name I'd been using professionally for 2 years, carefully keeping it separate from my family name. The name under which I'd slowly, quietly, been building a reputation that had nothing to do with the Winters family wealth or influence. The email continued, "We understand you have maintained a low profile regarding your success, and we respect that. However, we believe your story of choosing authenticity over family expectations, of building something meaningful outside the shadow of privilege would resonate with our readers. We would like to conduct an on-location shoot and interview at your earliest convenience. Our team can be available as soon as tomorrow." Tomorrow. Sunday, the day my entire family was planning to have brunch at my parents' house to continue the anniversary celebrations. I stood there on that terrace, the email glowing on my phone screen, and I made a decision that would either be the best or worst of my life. I typed back, "Tomorrow would be perfect. However, I have a family gathering at my parents' estate in Connecticut. Would you consider conducting the shoot there? I think it would provide an interesting contrast to the story." The response came within minutes. "That would be ideal. Our crew will arrive at 11 a.m. We'll need about 4 hours for the full shoot and interview. Thank you for this opportunity, Ms. Winters, or should we say Ms. Frost?" I slipped my phone back into my clutch and walked back into the party. Victoria was still holding court, now telling a story about a charity gala she'd organized that raised $500,000 for underprivileged children. "It's about giving back," she was saying. "Those of us who have been blessed with success have a responsibility to help those less fortunate." "How noble," I said, perhaps louder than necessary. Several heads turned. "Tell me, Victoria, what do you think makes someone successful?" She looked at me with barely concealed irritation. "Financial stability, professional achievement, social standing. The basics, Emma. Things you'd understand if you hadn't thrown away your education to play with cameras." "Interesting," I said, accepting a fresh glass of champagne from a passing server. And what if I told you that success could be measured in other ways? In impact? In artistry? In authenticity? James laughed from across the room. Come on, Em, this isn't one of your coffee shop philosophy sessions. Success is measurable, it's quantifiable. It's not some abstract concept you can define however you want to make yourself feel better. You're absolutely right, I said, raising my glass. Success is measurable, and tomorrow I think we'll all get a very interesting lesson in measurement. My mother frowned. What are you talking about, Emma? Nothing, I said, smiling perhaps the first genuine smile I'd smiled at a family gathering in years. Just that tomorrow's brunch might be more interesting than usual. I left shortly after that, driving back to my studio apartment in Brooklyn, my mind racing with possibilities. The studio was small, just 400 square feet, but every inch of it was mine. The walls were covered with my photographs, not the Instagram food shots that paid the bills, but the real work. The shadows and light of New York City, the faces of strangers caught in moments of pure emotion. The stories told in single frames that had caught the attention of critics and collectors around the world. My laptop sat on the desk by the window, and I opened it to check my E.W. Frost email account, the one my family knew nothing about. There were dozens of messages I hadn't told them about. The invitation to exhibit in Paris next spring, the offer from a major publisher for a second book, the inquiry from a documentary filmmaker who wanted to profile emerging artists, the notification that one of my pieces had sold at auction for $50,000. I'd kept it all secret for 2 years. At first, it was because I was afraid of failing, of proving my family right. Then, as the success grew, it became something else, a private victory, a world that belonged only to me. But now, standing in my tiny apartment looking at the life I'd built in the shadows, I realized I was tired of hiding. The next morning arrived gray and drizzly, the kind of October day that made Connecticut look like a watercolor painting. I arrived at my parents' house early, parking my beat-up Honda Civic next to Victoria's Mercedes and James's Tesla. The family was already gathered in the sunroom, a glass-enclosed space that overlooked the gardens. "Emma," my mother said with surprise, "you're early, and you're wearing—" She paused, taking in my outfit. I'd chosen carefully, black jeans, a simple white t-shirt, and a leather jacket. Not the apologetic, trying to fit in clothes I usually wore to family gatherings, but the clothes I wore when I was being myself. "I thought I'd try something different," I said, pouring myself coffee from the silver service on the sideboard. Victoria looked me up and down with undisguised disdain. "Different is one word for it. You look like you're about to go to one of those underground clubs you used to frequent in college." "Maybe I am," I said, checking my phone. 10:47 a.m. Or maybe the party is coming to me. Before anyone could respond, the doorbell rang. My father frowned. "We're not expecting anyone else." "Actually," I said, standing up, "I invited some people. I hope you don't mind." I walked to the front door, my family trailing behind me in confusion. When I opened it, there stood a team of 8 people, cameras and equipment in hand. At the front was a woman in her 40s with silver hair and an air of absolute authority. "Ms. Winters," she said, extending her hand, "I'm Patricia Chen, editor-in-chief of Elite Style magazine. We're here for your cover shoot." The silence behind me was deafening. I could practically feel my family's shock radiating in waves. "Cover shoot?" my mother finally managed to say. Patricia smiled professionally. "Yes, we're featuring your daughter as our December cover story, the artist who walked away from millions to make millions." It's quite an inspiring tale. Victoria's voice, when she found it, was strangled. "There must be some mistake. Emma doesn't— she's not— E.W. Frost?" Patricia said, turning to look at my sister with polite interest. "No, there's no mistake. Your sister is one of the most exciting emerging photographers in the international art scene. Didn't you know?" The next 4 hours unfolded like a surreal dream. The crew transformed our family sunroom into a photography set, but not in the way my family expected. Instead of photographing me in glamorous poses, they photographed me working. setting up my own cameras, adjusting lights, in my element. They wanted authenticity, Patricia explained, not artifice. The interview portion was conducted in the living room, with my family hovering in the doorway like ghosts at their own haunting. Patricia's questions were incisive, thoughtful, and revealed layer by layer the career I'd built in secret. "Tell me about the decision to use a pseudonym," she said, her recorder capturing every word. "My family name carries weight," I said, aware of my parents listening. I needed to know that any success I achieved was mine, not theirs. I needed to prove, to myself more than anyone, that I could create something valuable without the Winters name opening doors. "And the financial success? Our research indicates you've earned close to $2 million in the past 18 months through sales and commissions." I heard my mother's sharp intake of breath. 2.3 million, actually, I said, though most of it has been reinvested in equipment and studio space. I just signed a lease on a gallery in Chelsea. "A gallery?" James's voice cracked from the doorway. Patricia turned to look at him. "You must be very proud of your sister. It's not easy to break into the art world, especially at her age." We didn't know," he said weakly. "Tell me about your upcoming exhibition in Paris," Patricia continued, turning back to me. "It's at the Galerie Lumière," I said, "a solo show, 40 pieces exploring the theme of visibility and invisibility in urban spaces. The opening is in March." "The same gallery that showed Cartier-Bresson?" Patricia's assistant chimed in. "That's incredible." Victoria had moved into the room now, her face pale. "How did we not know about this?" Patricia looked at her with interest. "You're the sister? The lawyer?" She pulled out her phone, scrolling through something. "Yes, here it is. There's a piece in the exhibition called The Prosecutor. It's a shadow study, quite striking. The gallery has already received several offers for it, I believe." "You took my picture?" Victoria's voice was small. "I photograph what I see," I said simply. "You were at the courthouse last year, remember? You'd just won that big case. You were standing on the steps, and the light was hitting you in this way that made you look powerful but isolated. It's one of my favorite pieces, actually." The photo shoot moved through the house, the crew capturing me in various locations. In my father's study, surrounded by the books I'd read growing up, the education that had informed my art even if I'd walked away from the degree. In the garden, where I'd first learned to see light and shadow as a child with a disposable camera. In the kitchen, where our housekeeper Maria hugged me and told the crew how I'd always been taking pictures, even as a little girl. "She saw things," Maria said in her accented English. "The others, they looked but didn't see. Emma, she saw." It was during the final portion of the shoot, back in the sunroom with the gray October light filtering through the glass, that Patricia asked the question that changed everything. "Your family seems surprised by your success. How does it feel to have kept this from them?" I looked at my parents, my siblings, all standing there like they were seeing me for the first time. "It wasn't about keeping it from them," I said slowly. "It was about keeping it for myself. When you grow up in a family where success is measured in very specific ways, where your worth is determined by your ability to meet those specific metrics, you learn to protect the things that matter to you. My art, my vision, my version of success, I needed to nurture it away from their expectations, their definitions, their judgments." "And now?" Patricia prompted. "Now I realize that hiding my light didn't make theirs shine any brighter. It just made family gatherings really awkward." There was a moment of surprised laughter from the crew. Even my father's mouth twitched slightly. Patricia stood, signaling the end of the interview. "I think we have everything we need. The issue comes out in 3 weeks. Ms. Winters, or should I say Ms. Frost, thank you for your time and your honesty." As the crew packed up their equipment, Victoria approached me. She looked smaller somehow, diminished in a way I'd never seen before. 2.3 million, she said quietly. "It's not about the money," I said. "It never was." "Then what was it about?" I thought about how to answer that, how to explain years of feeling invisible, years of being dismissed, years of having my dreams treated like childish fantasies. It was about proving that there's more than one way to be successful, that art has value, that following your passion isn't just some naive cliché, that sometimes the family disappointment is just disappointing the family's expectations, not disappointing herself. James joined us, his face thoughtful. The Guerrilla Gallery. I've heard of it. My colleague's wife bought a piece there last month for $70,000. Was that Urban Solitude? I confirmed. Yeah, that was mine. Why didn't you tell us? My mother asked, and for the first time in years, she sounded genuinely hurt rather than coldly disapproving. Would you have believed me? I asked. Or would you have found a way to diminish it, to make it less than? Victoria would have said it was a fluke. James would have calculated how it compared to his earnings. You and Dad would have wondered why I couldn't have just done this as a hobby while maintaining a real career. The silence that followed was answer enough. My father cleared his throat. The December issue of Elite Style. That's the one with the influencer list, isn't it? The one Victoria's been trying to get into for 3 years. Dad, Victoria said, a warning in her voice. But he continued, looking at me with something I'd never seen before. Respect. Your grandmother would have been proud. She was an artist too, you know. Before she married my father, she gave it up, said there was no room for art in the life she chose. She always regretted it. I'd never known that. In all the family stories, all the carefully curated history, no one had ever mentioned that my grandmother had been an artist. She would have understood, he continued, what it means to choose your own path, even if the rest of us didn't. The crew was leaving now, carrying their equipment to the van outside. Patricia stopped at the door, turning back to look at the family tableau we made, the successful siblings, the prominent parents, and me, the supposed failure who had just been revealed as something else entirely. You know, she said thoughtfully, we're always looking for family stories, the dynamics, the expectations, the surprises. If you ever want to do a follow-up piece. Thank you, I said quickly, but I think one surprise per family is enough. After the crew left, we sat in the sunroom, the branch spread untouched on the table. The silence was different now, not the uncomfortable silence of things unsaid, but the thoughtful silence of people recalibrating their understanding of the world. Finally, Victoria spoke. That piece, the prosecutor. What did you mean by powerful but isolated? I looked at my sister, really looked at her for the first time in years. Beneath the perfect makeup and designer clothes, I saw something I'd never noticed before: loneliness. You were standing on those courthouse steps, and you'd just won this huge case, but you were alone. Everyone else had gone to celebrate, but you stood there, looking out at the city like you were searching for something, or someone. It was beautiful and sad at the same time. Her eyes filled with tears, which shocked me more than anything else that had happened that day. Victoria didn't cry. That was the day Richard left, she said quietly. My fiancé. He said I cared more about winning than I did about him. He was right. I didn't know, I said. How could you? I never told anyone. Successful people don't fail at relationships. That's not part of the narrative. James laughed bitterly. Successful people. God, we really bought into it, didn't we? The whole performance. I haven't taken a vacation in 3 years. I don't even remember the last time I did something just because I enjoyed it. My mother reached for the coffee pot, her hands shaking slightly. When did we become these people? When did we decide that success only looked one way? When grandfather built the fortune, my father said quietly, and made it clear that maintaining it was our only purpose. Emma, you're the only one who escaped. I didn't escape, I said. I just chose a different prison. Do you think it's been easy, keeping this secret, living a double life, coming to every family gathering and pretending to be less than I am because I was afraid of this? of having to explain myself, of having to justify my choices, of having to prove my worth in your currency. Our currency, my mother repeated. Money, status, traditional success. Exactly, but my currency is different. It's the woman who bought one of my photographs because it reminded her of her grandmother. It's the teenager who wrote to tell me that my work inspired him to pursue art despite his parents' objections. It's the moment when I capture something true, something real, something that makes people feel less alone in the world. Victoria stood up abruptly, walking to the window. "I've been so cruel to you," she said, her back to us. "All these years I thought I was motivating you, pushing you to be better, but I was just afraid that if you succeeded on your own terms, it would mean my terms were wrong." "They're not wrong," I said, joining her at the window. "They're just not the only way." Outside, the October rain had stopped and weak sunlight was breaking through the clouds. The garden looked different in this light, less manicured, more wild, more beautiful. "Can I see it?" Victoria asked. "The photograph of me." I pulled out my phone, scrolling through my professional portfolio until I found it. The image was black and white. Victoria in her power suit standing on the courthouse steps, her face turned toward the sky, the shadows creating a pattern that looked almost like wings behind her. She stared at it for a long moment. "I look powerful," I said. "Lonely," she countered. "Both," we said together. James joined us, looking at the image. "That's art? It's just a photograph." "Look closer," I said. "See how the light creates a halo effect around her head? But the shadows at her feet look like chains? It's about the price of success, the way we can be elevated and trapped at the same time." He studied it more carefully. Oh, I see it now. That's actually brilliant." "The gallery in Paris wants to make it the centerpiece of the exhibition," I said. "If Victoria's okay with that. You want to show this in Paris?" Victoria's voice was small. "But it's so vulnerable." "All good art is vulnerable," I said. "It's about showing the truth, even when it's uncomfortable, especially when it's uncomfortable." My parents had joined us now, the five of us standing at the window like we were posing for one of those family portraits we'd had taken every year, the ones where we all smiled and pretended everything was perfect. "What else have you kept from us?" my mother asked, but her tone was curious rather than accusatory. "I bought a building," I said, deciding that if we were doing honesty, we might as well do it completely. "In Brooklyn. I'm turning it into artist studios and a gallery space, affordable spaces for emerging artists who can't afford the Manhattan rents." "A building?" My father's business instincts kicked in. "That's a significant investment." $2.8 million, I said. I had a silent partner for the additional funds. "Who?" James asked. "Someone who believes in art for art's sake. Someone who thinks success should be measured in impact, not just income." "Who?" Victoria pressed. I smiled. "Maria's son. Remember Roberto? He went to community college, and you all thought he was wasting his potential? He created an app that sold to Google for $40 million. He's been investing in artists and musicians and writers, people who are trying to create something meaningful." The irony wasn't lost on any of them. The housekeeper's son, the one they'd dismissed as having no future, was now wealthier than all of them combined. "He believed in you," my mother said softly. "He believed in art," I corrected. "He believed that creativity has value beyond its monetary worth. He believed that someone from outside the traditional power structures could create something powerful." "Like you did," Victoria said, "like we both did." We stood there in silence for a moment, 5 people who shared blood and history, but had never really shared understanding, until now. "The magazine comes out in 3 weeks?" my father asked. "December 1st, I confirmed. "We should have a party," my mother said suddenly. "A launch party, here at the house. Invite everyone. Let them see what you've accomplished." "Mom, I don't need—" "It's not for you," she interrupted. It's for us. We need to show you that we see you now, that we're proud of you, that we're sorry for all the years we didn't understand. I looked around at my family, these people who had made me feel small for so long, who were now looking at me like I was someone worth seeing. Okay, I said, but I'm bringing my friends, my real friends, the artists and baristas and struggling musicians, the people who knew E.W. Frost before elite style did. Good, my father said firmly. It's time this house saw some real life instead of just successful facades. Over the next 3 weeks, something shifted in our family dynamic. Victoria started calling me for advice, not about success or money, but about happiness, about finding meaning beyond winning cases. She even came to my studio in Brooklyn, spending an entire afternoon looking through my work, asking questions about technique and meaning and vision. I want to buy one, she said, standing in front of a photograph of Grand Central Station at rush hour, hundreds of people frozen in motion, all going somewhere but looking nowhere. You don't have to. I want to, for my office, to remind me that success without connection is just sophisticated loneliness. James started joining me on photo walks through the city, not talking much, just walking and watching me work. On our third walk, he brought his own camera, an old film one he'd found in his apartment. I used to love this, he said, adjusting the focus on a street scene. Before business school beat it out of me. It's still there, I said, watching him lose himself in the viewfinder. The creative impulse doesn't die, it just goes into hiding. My parents were perhaps the most surprising. My mother started pulling out photo albums I'd never seen, showing me pictures of my grandmother's paintings, watercolors of flowers and landscapes that were actually quite good. She gave me this before she died, my mother said, handing me a leather journal. She said to give it to the artist in the family. I always thought she meant Victoria, with her perfect presentations, or James with his innovative business models, but it was you. It was always you. The journal was filled with my grandmother's thoughts on art, on creativity, on the courage it takes to see the world differently and share that vision with others. On the last page, she'd written, "To my future artist grandchild, don't let them convince you that beauty has no value. Don't let them tell you that success only comes in one shape. The world needs people who see differently. Be one of them." The night before the magazine launch, I sat in my studio apartment, looking at the advance copy Patricia had sent me. The cover photo wasn't a glamour shot or a posed portrait. It was me in my element, adjusting my camera, completely absorbed in my work. The headline read, "The Millionaire in the Shadows, How E.W. Frost Built an Art Empire While Her Family Wasn't Looking." Inside, the article told the story I'd never told anyone, the nights spent developing film in my bathroom-turned-darkroom, the rejections from galleries, the slow build of reputation and skill, the first sale that made me cry, the moment I realized I could make a living doing what I loved. But more than that, it told the story of choosing your own path, of defining success for yourself, of having the courage to disappoint others in order to not disappoint yourself. My phone rang. It was Victoria. "I just wanted to say," she began, then paused. "I'm proud of you, and I'm sorry. For all of it, for every cruel comment, every dismissive look, every time I made you feel less than. You were never less than. You were just different, and different scared me because it made me question everything I'd built my life on." "We all built our lives on what we thought we were supposed to want," I said. "You're brilliant at what you do, Vic. That's not diminished by me being good at something else." "I know," she said, "or at least I'm learning to know." She paused again. "That photo of me, the one going to Paris, I want to buy it. It's already sold," I said. "Oh." The disappointment in her voice was clear. "To Roberto, but he's agreed to loan it back to you whenever you want. He said something about successful women supporting each other, even when they define success differently." She laughed, a real laugh, not the practiced one she used at parties. "Thank you for seeing me when I couldn't see myself. That's what artists do," I said. "We show people what's already there but hidden." The launch party was unlike any event the Winters house had ever seen. Yes, there were the usual suspects: my parents' society friends, Victoria's legal colleagues, James's business associates. But there were also my people, artists with paint still under their fingernails, musicians who'd come straight from gigs, writers clutching notebooks, the barista from my local coffee shop who'd been the first person to buy one of my prints. The house had been transformed into a gallery for the night, my photographs hanging on walls that usually displayed old masters and family portraits. But the most powerful moment came when my father stood up to speak. "I want to tell you all a story," he began, his voice carrying across the room, "about a girl who disappointed her family by choosing art over commerce, passion over profit, meaning over money. That girl was my mother. She gave up her dreams to fit into the life that was expected of her, and she regretted it until the day she died." He looked at me across the room. I swore I would never let my children make the same mistake, giving up their dreams for someone else's definition of success. And then I became the very thing my mother had run from, someone who valued achievement over authenticity, wealth over worth, status over soul. I pushed my children to succeed in narrow, specific ways, never realizing that success could look different for each of them. He raised his glass. To Emma, who had the courage to disappoint us in order to not disappoint herself, who built something beautiful in the shadows while we were blinded by the spotlight, who proved that the family failure was actually the family's greatest success, just in a different language than we spoke. The room erupted in applause, but I was looking at my grandmother's portrait on the wall, the one painted by someone famous and expensive. Next to it, almost hidden, was one of my photographs, a self-portrait taken in my studio, my face half in shadow, half in light. The resemblance to my grandmother was striking, something I'd never noticed before. Patricia Chen was there, of course, documenting the event for a follow-up piece. She found me on the terrace, the same terrace where I'd received her email just 3 weeks earlier. "How does it feel?" she asked, "to finally be seen by your family?" I thought about it for a moment. "Like coming home," I said, "if home was a place I'd never actually been before." "That's beautifully put," she said, making a note. "Very artistic." "Well," I said, smiling, "I am an artist, even if it took my family a decade to notice." Victoria joined us, champagne in hand, looking more relaxed than I'd ever seen her. "The magazine is already sold out," she said. "Did you know? Every newsstand in the city is out of copies." "We're doing a second printing," Patricia confirmed. "It's our best-selling issue in 5 years." "Because everyone loves a story about someone who was underestimated proving everyone wrong," Victoria said. Then more quietly, "including the people doing the underestimating." As the party continued around us, the 3 of us stood on the terrace, looking out at the same gardens I'd stared at during countless family gatherings where I'd felt invisible. They looked different now, not because they'd changed, but because I had. I was no longer the failure trying to hide in the shadows. I was the artist who had learned to work with shadows, to find beauty in them, to create something meaningful from them. "You know what the ironic part is?" I said to Victoria. "All those years you thought I was wasting my life, I was actually building it. Every rejection, every dismissive comment, every moment of feeling unseen, it all went into the work. You gave me material. Pain is excellent material." "I'm sorry it was painful," she said. "I'm not," I replied, surprising myself with the honesty. Without the pain, there would be no art. Without the struggle, there would be no story. Without the darkness, I would never have learned to see the light. The party went on until nearly 3 in the morning, the house filled with a kind of energy it had never contained before. Artists and executives mingling, musicians playing impromptu sets in the living room, writers scribbling observations in corners. My 2 worlds hadn't just collided. They had merged into something new, something unexpected, something beautiful. As the last guests were leaving, my family and I found ourselves in the kitchen, exhausted but exhilarated. Maria was there too, having stayed late to help, and she pulled me into a hug. "I always knew," she whispered in Spanish. "You had the eyes of someone who sees. Your family, they look but don't see. You see." "What did she say?" my mother asked. "That Emma sees things," Maria translated, then added, "like her grandmother, the artist." We all looked at the portrait again, my grandmother frozen in oils, formal and distant, then at my self-portrait beside it, raw and honest and real. "She would have loved this," my father said quietly. "All of it. The rebellion, the success on your own terms, the way you forced us all to see differently." "She would have loved that her granddaughter didn't give up," my mother added. "That someone in this family finally chose art over expectation." "She would have loved," Victoria said, surprising us all, "that Emma found a way to be successful without sacrificing her soul." James nodded. "She would have loved that the family disappointment became the family inspiration." "I was never a disappointment," I said, finally able to say the words I'd needed to say for years. "I was just different, and different isn't less than. It's just different." "We know that now," my mother said, reaching for my hand. "We see that now." "Better late than never," Victoria offered, half joking, half hopeful. "Better late than never," I agreed. The sun was starting to rise, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold that no camera could ever truly capture, but that I would try to capture anyway, because that's what artists do. We chase the impossible, trying to show others what we see, hoping they'll understand, or at least try to. Over the following months, the magazine article changed everything and nothing. I was still the same person, still living in my studio apartment, though I was renovating a larger space in the building I'd bought, still taking photographs, still seeing the world through my particular lens. But now, my family saw me too, really saw me. Victoria started coming to my exhibitions, bringing her legal colleagues, proud to introduce me as her sister, the artist. She even commissioned me to do a series of photographs for her law firm, not corporate headshots, but artistic interpretations of justice, of law, of the human side of legal practice. James invited me to document his company's journey, not in corporate promotional materials, but as an art project, the beauty and brutality of startup life, the dreams and defeats, the moments of triumph and exhaustion. The resulting exhibition, Silicon Dreams, was featured in the New York Times. My parents transformed one wing of the Connecticut house into a gallery, displaying not just my work, but the work of other emerging artists I knew. They hosted salons and exhibitions, bringing together their society friends and my artist community, creating a space where different definitions of success could coexist. But the most meaningful change was smaller, quieter. It was Victoria calling me when she had a bad day, not for advice on success, but for permission to be vulnerable. It was James picking up his camera again, finding joy in creation without the pressure of monetization. It was my mother pulling out my grandmother's old easel and taking watercolor classes. It was my father reading poetry again, something he'd loved in college but abandoned for more practical pursuits. It was our family learning that success isn't a single mountain with one path to the top, but a range of peaks, each with its own trails, its own views, its own beauty. A year after the magazine article, I stood in the Galerie Lumière in Paris, surrounded by my work, watching people respond to images I'd created in solitude and shadow. The exhibition was a success by any measure: sales, critical acclaim, attendance. But the moment that mattered most was when I saw Victoria standing in front of the prosecutor, tears streaming down her face. "You saw me," she said when I approached. "Really saw me. The loneliness, the isolation, the price of always winning. You saw what I couldn't admit even to myself." "That's what art does," I said. "It shows us ourselves, reflected back in ways we don't expect." "Is that why you kept it secret for so long?" she asked. "Because you were showing us ourselves and knew we wouldn't like what we saw?" "Partly," I admitted, "but mostly because I needed to know it was real. that what I was creating had value beyond your approval or disapproval. I needed to build something that belonged entirely to me before I could share it with you. And now? Now I know that my success doesn't diminish yours, and yours doesn't diminish mine. We're just successful in different languages. The opening was attended by critics and collectors, artists and admirers. But the people who mattered most were my family, all of them there, seeing me not as the failure who had finally made good, but as the artist who had always been good. They just hadn't known how to see it. Patricia Chen was there too, working on a book about families and success and the different ways we define achievement. She interviewed us all, individually and together, capturing the story of a family that had learned to expand their definition of success, to see value in different forms, to celebrate diverse achievements. "What would you tell other families?" she asked me during our interview. Families where someone is considered a disappointment because they chose a different path? That disappointment is often just fear, I said. Fear that if someone succeeds differently, it invalidates your own success. Fear that if there are multiple paths, you might have chosen the wrong one. Fear that love has to look like agreement, that support has to look like sameness. And what would you tell the disappointments? The ones who are seen as failures because they define success differently? That their definition is valid. That building something meaningful is better than building something expected. That the approval of people who can only see one form of success isn't worth sacrificing your own vision. And that sometimes, if you're patient and persistent, even the people who doubted you will eventually see what you saw all along. Which is that there are as many ways to be successful as there are people trying to succeed. That art and commerce, creativity and achievement, passion and profit don't have to be opposing forces. That a family can contain multitudes of success, each valid, each valuable, each worth celebrating. The book, when it came out, was titled The Successful Failure: Redefining Achievement in Modern Families. My family's story was just one of many, but it resonated with thousands of readers who had their own version of being the family disappointment, the one who chose differently, the one who succeeded in translation. I received hundreds of emails from people who had been inspired to pursue their own definitions of success, to stop hiding their achievements because they didn't fit the family mold, to have difficult conversations with parents and siblings about different forms of value. One email stood out. It was from a young woman named Sarah, whose family had disowned her for choosing social work over investment banking. She'd seen the magazine article, read the book, visited my exhibitions. She wrote, "You gave me permission to stop apologizing for who I am. You showed me that success isn't about meeting other people's expectations, but about exceeding your own. You taught me that being a disappointment to others doesn't mean being a disappointment to yourself. Thank you for being visible, for telling your story, for showing those of us in the shadows that we're not hiding. We're developing, like photographs in a darkroom, waiting for the right moment to emerge into the light." I wrote back, telling her what I wish someone had told me during all those years of feeling unseen. Your value doesn't depend on their vision. Your success doesn't require their stamp of approval. Your worth isn't diminished by their inability to see it. Keep creating, keep building, keep believing in your own definition of achievement. And remember, sometimes the family disappointment becomes the family inspiration. It just takes time for everyone's eyes to adjust to a different kind of light. 5 years have passed since that October night when Victoria told me to enjoy my sad little life. The magazine crew has come and gone, but the impact of that day ripples outward still. My gallery in Brooklyn is thriving, providing affordable space for emerging artists. My work has been exhibited in galleries around the world. The building Roberto and I bought has become a creative hub, a place where different forms of success intersect and inspire each other. But more importantly, my family has changed. We've learned to see each other not as competition, but as complement. Victoria still practices law, but she also serves on the board of 3 arts organizations. James still runs his company, but he also teaches photography workshops on weekends. My parents have become patrons of the arts, but more than that, they've become parents who see all their children, not just the ones who fit their original vision. At our family gatherings now, success is discussed in broader terms. It's James's latest business venture and my upcoming exhibition. It's Victoria's courtroom victories and the poetry she's started writing. It's my parents' charitable foundation and their newfound appreciation for different forms of achievement. The sunroom where Victoria shattered that champagne glass is now filled with art. Mine, my grandmother's recovered paintings, pieces by artists we've discovered and supported. It's become a room where different visions coexist, where success takes many forms, where the light reveals rather than conceals. Sometimes I stand in that room, looking at the journey mapped out on its walls, and I think about that girl who knelt to pick up broken glass while her sister told her to enjoy her sad little life. I want to tell her that it gets better. That recognition comes, even if it takes longer than expected, that the very things that make you a disappointment to some will make you an inspiration to others. That success is not a single story, but a library of different narratives, each valid, each valuable. But mostly, I want to tell her this. Your life is not sad or little. It's rich with possibility, large with potential. The people who can't see that are limited by their own vision, not by your reality. Keep taking pictures. Keep seeing differently. Keep building in the shadows if that's where you feel safe. But know that one day you'll step into the light, and when you do, even those who doubted you will have to adjust their eyes to see what was always there. A different kind of success, a different kind of value, a different kind of beauty. And when that magazine crew arrives, when the truth is finally revealed, when your family sees you for who you really are, you'll realize that their approval, while nice to have, was never the point. The point was to build something meaningful, something authentic, something that belonged entirely to you. The point was to succeed on your own terms, in your own way, in your own time. The point was to prove to yourself more than anyone else that there are many ways to live a successful life, and choosing your own way, even when others call it failure, is perhaps the greatest success of all. Thank you for listening to my story. If this story moved you, and if you believe that everyone deserves to have their true worth seen, please like this video and share it with someone who needs to hear this message. Comment below and tell me, what was the moment in the story that resonated with you the most? And if you want more powerful stories about finding your strength and overcoming the odds, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss what's next. End.